Some say you put so much effort into work. Why not give that same effort at home? But what they don't see is the cost. What they don't see is the emotional remnant of a day's work. They don't see the energy it takes to shift roles from being a first responder to being a father, or the mental effort it takes to try and shift from protector to partner. Leadership isn't about equal effort. It's about aligned presence. It's about giving the appropriate energy for the appropriate audience. Today, we're dismantling another myth that keeps many trapped. That myth is that leadership looks the same in every room. Welcome to the Living Beyond Average podcast, where we challenge oversimplified cliches and simplify overcomplicated ideas. The information shared will be grounded in truth, not opinion, facts, not assumptions. Today's episode is titled, The Myth of Same Effort. Have you ever been told you give your best to everyone else and you come home empty? I remember when I worked as a motorcycle officer. I had the privilege of taking my police motorcycle home. It did save time with me being able to split lanes and get home quickly. It saved money in gas. But what it didn't save me was the space that I needed. See, it didn't allow time for me to decompress. It didn't allow time for me to mentally and emotionally shift roles. Because when you're riding home in full uniform on a marked police motorcycle, the public, they don't see you as being off duty. And whether it's in your jurisdiction or not, if an emergency happens, you will be expected to respond. So by the time I would finally make it home, I would pull into the garage and I was still wound up. I was still hypervigilant. I was still in work mode. And just when I thought I could breathe, my family would walk into the garage. They were excited that I was home. Well, I was excited to be home. But what they didn't realize was that husband, dad, granddad, plumber, carpenter, security advisor, protector, financial manager, and care bear, I was still processing the day. I was still actively working to mentally and emotionally return home from the streets. See, I was met with smiles, laughter, and hugs. And although I was happy to have that love present, I was still only partway in. And this wasn't because I didn't love them, but because I hadn't shifted. I was still outside. I was still out there in my mind. Me, I was still on duty in my body. And I didn't know how to explain that to them. That I needed a moment to come down, to shift roles. I didn't know how to explain to them that I needed time to come home emotionally. It wasn't about giving them less effort. It was more about me needing a moment to deliver the kind of effort, the kind of love, and the kind of attention that I know they deserve. I am your host, Lionel Murphy. I am an author, a veteran, a rancher, a leadership coach, and a truth teller. I'm here to dismantle the myths that keep many stuck in emotional confusion, in an effort to help call them into the clarity of true leadership, both at home and at work. If you missed last week's episode, we tackled the myth that trying harder will fix it. We learned that effort without alignment doesn't lead to connection. It leads to exhaustion. Well, today, we take that a step further, because many of us aren't just exhausted from trying harder. We're exhausted from trying to give the same effort in two completely different environments. Leadership at work and leadership at home, they don't demand the same kind of energy. They demand different levels of expression. They demand a different type of presence. And when we don't understand that difference, what we risk is showing up full in one place and often misunderstood in another. I speak from my lived experiences. I am not speaking to you as a clinician nor as a medical professional. The information shared is not intended to replace professional counseling or therapy. So if you feel the need, if you are experiencing trauma or mental health challenges, please seek qualified professionals for care. Now, I want to pause just for a moment to answer a question, a thoughtful question at that I received from one of our listeners. And that question was, is this a podcast about relationships? Well, the short answer is yes, it is. But not in the way that you might expect. Because here's the truth. Leadership requires relationships, whether it be at home, in friendships, on the job, and in the way that we engage with others in the world. So while we may talk about love, conflict, and communication, it will always be through the lens of leadership. That's leadership in life, leadership in love, and leadership in the decisions that help define us. We start with relationships because that's where poor leadership often hides. But make no mistake about it, this is a leadership podcast. The quote for today is, "You can't lead in every room the same way, or you'll lose the rooms that matter." Let's break that down. So what does that mean? I'll try to explain it with a short story. You see, I can remember being in the Crenshaw High School choir under the direction of Miss Iris Stevenson. And one of the most important lessons she taught me was to know your audience. See, at the time, I took it as surface level advice. But what I didn't realize then that I do know now, was that she was offering me some profound wisdom that would actually help me later on in life and in leadership. You see, leadership is about calibration. It's about giving the right energy to the appropriate audience. The difference is that at work, your leadership might sound like you giving orders, assigning tasks, and creating schedules. But at home, your leadership might sometimes need you to be silent. That leadership could sound like laughter, It might even sound like you just asking loving questions. See, effort is not one size fits all. When we lead with the wrong tone and the wrong energy, especially in spaces where kindness and understanding are needed, what we risk is creating emotional disconnection. Even if we, with every good intention, lead with our best. Our cliche for today is, if you really cared, you try just as hard at home as you do at work. The problem with that cliche is that it implies that love is proven by equal effort, when in reality, different roles require different energies. See, that cliche dismisses the invisible emotional toll of work, and it dishonors the slow and sometimes tedious process of emotional transition. So if we look at this through the lens of a man, we might see that men are often conditioned to see effort as proof of value. But emotional leadership sometimes requires patience and silence. It sometimes requires softness and vulnerability and self-awareness. When we look at effort through a woman's lens, we often find that presence is interpreted as love. So when energy fades or when energy disappears, women may feel dismissed and without presence. They stop feeling protected or prioritized. To help further explain the importance of decompression, I will use a story from the ranch. You see, you don't work a horse, ride a horse, and get them all wound up and only to put them back in their stall without giving them a chance to cool down. Doing that can lead to muscle stiffness, cramping, heat stress, and a number of other things that just wouldn't be healthy for the horse. They can be left with a negative association for work. And you risk damaging that trust bond that you work so hard to develop. So to minimize the risks, you give them time to cool down. You give that horse time to transition mentally. And it's not because that horse is weak, but because it's worked up. See, this is much like the first responder who arrives home without having time to decompress. They risk bringing home workplace trauma, or they may risk increasing emotional detachment from their loved ones. My recommendation to the first responder and to the family: try to work on building a transition ritual, one that goes between work and home. Whether it's sitting in a car for a few minutes, praying, breathing. Hell, if you need to go on a walk before you go in the house, try that. But work on shifting your nervous system before you shift your role. And as you develop this decompression or transition plan, get the family involved. You could ask your partner, what does emotional presence look like to you? And as I have suggested in the past, although I am still working on this myself, you want to try journaling so that you begin to recognize what true presence feels like. versus when you're just physically there. This week, I want you to pay attention to your transitions. I want you to pay attention to where and when you are increasing effort. Pay attention to what's really needed and the difference between what's needed at work and what's needed at home. This is you working on a different kind of leadership. You can ask yourself, am I using work leadership patterns at home where emotional connection is really needed? Where am I emotionally absent, but functionally present? What ritual can I create to return home fully? As we close, I will leave you with this. Leadership isn't about bringing the same energy everywhere. It's about bringing the right energy to the right places. So this week, I challenge you to lead, not with volume, but with awareness. Not just with duty, but with discernment. I want you to know your audience. If you're interested in the references used to inform this episode, you can find them in the captions. Until next we meet, remember to lead with integrity, ride with confidence, live beyond average. Be sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Living Beyond Average Podcast, where weekly we will highlight leaders both past and present. And if you like the content of our show, please show your support by subscribing. Also, leave a message to share your thoughts.